Hi doll!
Hey YouTube! So today I'm doing a special doll custom, a mini-me. And since I'm a total Tokyo Mew Mew nut, it's going to involve a Mew Me as well. The video is a bit late due to the weather and face-up problems, but it's still my birthday week. So since I'm a Mew Mew nut, I want to make it compatible with my Tokyo Mew Mew Elegance Collection Takara dolls. I could have gone for the 1/6 scale dolls, but I only have Ichigo, and well, getting the other girls is hard enough, let alone a body for customizing. And I technically prefer 1/12 scale as my collecting scale. So while the Takara silicone body is nice, it has its issues. And since I did the clothing comparison Pico Nemo video, I knew that the clothes are compatible. So I decided to use a Pico Nemo body. And I originally thought I'd just switch the heads between the bodies whenever I wanted to display her or play with her. But part of why I want a mini-me is that I can wear clothes that I don't have the confidence to wear in real life. So I need at least a normal head. So I thought, okay, normal head on the Pico Nemo body and switching the Mew Mew head between the bodies. But along came the R-Type Pico Nemo body and the clothes are no longer compatible in the pants department. But I also realized that in order to fit with my Tokyo Mew Mew dolls, I wouldn't be able to do what I want with the face up fairly. So I settled for the Takara doll, customized as a Mew Mew to fit in with my other Tokyo Mew Mew Takara dolls, and another doll with one head and two hairstyles. Yeah, I decided to make a head and a wig, and I can just switch the wig out when I want a different hairstyle. Anyway, I have kind of 2.5 dolls to get to, so let's hurry up and start. As for the Takara doll, I got my hands on a Zakuro, which at least gave me access to the ears. And I went with the Pico Nemo R-Type S, since that's the closest to my own body type. Kinda. Starting with the head, I tied off the hair and start cutting it as close as possible to the scalp. Then I used some hot water to remove the head from the body and the ears from the head. The vinyl on the head is quite a bit harder than normal dolls, so I'm being extra careful. Then, with a combination of tweezers, a wooden skewer, and a wire bent as a hook, I remove all the stubble inside the head. It was quite an ordeal as the neck is very small and my fingers ended up being a bit bruised. But I recommend a skewer to loosen the plugs from the scalp and then a wire to pull out all of the excess hair. After the head is nicely cleaned up, I get out a 2-part molding putty and then I encase the head in it to make a mold. And I use a wooden skewer in the neck so that I pretty much have a point of reference of where to cut open. After the mold was cured, I carefully cut it open to remove the head and the skewer before putting the skewer back and carefully using my polymer clay to fill in the head again. It took a few tries to get it right, but after I was happy, I put the head with the silicone mold in the oven to bake. After baking, I had to carefully widen the neck hole so that the neck joint for the Pico Nemo body can fit in properly. So luckily I decided to go with the two heads since the bodies technically aren't that compatible. I put the head on a skewer on a makeshift stand and wrapped it in cling wrap before adding 3 layers of a hairnet and putting wood glue or fabric glue all over that. After that's dry, I mark the edges of my wig cap and carefully remove it from the head before cutting off the excess of the hairnet and painting the scalp the color I want it to be. Next, I start adding hair. So for my normal hair, I got it from a big jumbo braid. It seemed kind of a waste for this super tiny head, but I'm sure I'll use it in the future. So I add glue to my wig cap and then carefully add the hair to the glue. Now go by that layer by layer until I reach the top. Now, instead of making wefts, I glue the hair directly to the wig cap to reduce bulk for the tiny head. I do, however, make wefts for the top of the head for the parting line. I make 2 thick wefts and glue them in the opposite direction of where I want the hair to go and flip them over. I do one first, then the other one, before I use boiling water to flatten all of the hair and the straightener to straighten out the hair from the jumbo weft. And because of the cling wrap used on the head, the wig cap is slightly too large, so I add a few wefts on the inside of the wig cap for good measure. After that's dry, I put it on the doll and start trimming the ends and styling the bangs. I used some of my water glue to style the bangs in front. And then I repeated the process with my other hair for my new form. So, back to the Takara head. I wiped the head and face up with acetone before giving it a good soapy wash, and then painting the scalp white so I can start my reroot. So the hair I'm using for my reroot is actually a beautiful iridescent tinsel. And long time ago I saw it in the store and it was just so pretty I couldn't resist buying it, and I finally have a use for it. And I thought using tinsel would be fine since the hair is short and you're not really going to brush and play with it, so it'll last in theory. So I take my hair rooting tool, which is a needle cut at an angle inside my craft knife holder, and then I fold in the hair plug by plug, going around the edge, working myself to the hair part, and when I reach the part I just plug them and move the hair in the opposite direction so that I don't have to worry about figuring that out later, because it's kind of hard to see with the tinsel. After I'm done with the reroot, I take some fabric glue and smoosh it around in the head. Since the head itself is a bit hard, it was a bit of an effort, and that along with the glue that doesn't like to come out of the bottle, it took a while. But after making sure when the glue was dyed that all the plugs are nice and tight, I went on with the next stuff. So unfortunately the next part is a bit out of frame, but I'll try to explain. I took some squares of fabric that I wanted my shoes to be and some clothesline pins. I pull the fabric around the foot, stretching it out and then locking it in place on the back of the leg and the bottom of the foot with the clothesline pins, trying to make sure that there is as few folds as possible. And then I cover that in a thin layer of fabric glue. After the first glue layer has dried, I remove the clothesline pins, and since the glue has dried, it stays in place before I add and I really glob on more fabric glue. It results in a kind of a plasticky texture for the fabric. After that's completely dry, I carefully remove the shoes from the feet and trim off the excess fabric before putting the shoes back on and adding my boot straps or whatever decorations you can think of. And I also glob that in fabric glue. Next I mix up some of my epoxy putty and I form the heels of the shoes. Now the shoes do have a bit of excess fabric on the bottom, which helps the epoxy stick to the shoe. And I keep the shoes on the dolls so that it's easier to handle them. Also, I swiped some magnets from a small Polly Pocket doll for my Pico Nemo's shoes, because I wanted to try making a magnetic base for her. Then I start with sewing. First off the pants. I piece the pants together, starting with the front crotch seam and piecing together the front side seam to the front center seam up to the split before I fold over the edges of the split and sew that in place and press the seams. And then I piece the front side to the front back, and the side back, and then the side back to the center back. Before folding over and sewing the top hem, and then sewing the back crotch seam, then sewing the inseam, and then folding over the edges of the bottom hem and sewing that in place. And then I add the snap closure and that's done. And I repeat that for the second body. Then I move on to the top, starting from the center, sewing that and folding over the split hem, and then piecing all the pieces together to form the top. For the Takara body, I used a bit of a simpler pattern for the top to mimic those of the other Tokyo Mew Mew girls. After piecing all of the sides together, I pin and hem the back seams, and then the top seam, and then the bottom seams before I add the Velcro closure in the back. For the choker, I simply stitched a piece of ribbon to my so-called lace, which I cut myself, before folding over the side, comparing it to my Takara doll, cutting it, folding over on the other side, adding Velcro, and adding a bead for the pendant. For the arm warmers, I have a trapezium piece that I fold over the top and bottom hems, sew, and then sew up the back seam, and that's done. For the arm puffs, I just take a rectangular piece and with my Leica, stitching that with a zigzag stitch and attaching it to my pink fabric. Then flipping over the seams and sewing up the back seam with a straight stitch. For her gloves, I just fold over a very stretchy piece of fabric over the hand and sew around the hand before turning it and turning it inside out. Simple but annoying. So I chose a black-footed cat as my animal. Although it's not heavily endangered, it is vulnerable and still on the RDA list. Anyway, for the tails, I took a rectangular piece of fabric and sewed it into a tube, closing off one end, turning it inside out, trimming off the excess fur, using a permanent marker to make stripes, and after washing that, I add a wire and attach it to the pants. So for the ears, for the Takara doll, I just repainted Sakuro's ears, and for my Pico Nemo doll, I used a triangular piece of faux fur, one in brown and one in white for the inside of the ear, glued them together, trimmed the fur and added the stripes to the brown part, and then glued that to the wig. Easy. So for her weapon, I made two versions, one with a handle that attaches to the Takara doll's hands and one without, which is also a bit taller than the Takara one. And the weapon is basically a carved knife on one side and a paintbrush on the other. I'm making it mostly out of polymer clay with a skewer base. So first off, I cut off 4 pieces of clay for my carved knife piece. So it's one piece of clay, then a wire, and then another piece of clay so that's one carved knife, and make 2 for the second weapon. Also, with my clay, I made a stand for my Takara doll off screen based on the design of the Takara Tokyo Mew Mew dolls, which is the base platform, a metal rod, and a clamp that holds the leg. Unfortunately, it's off screen, so you can't really see my design. But I take my skewers and add clay all over to form the shape of my weapon. It's a bit silly to try and explain because it's just adding clay and making decorations. But I did earlier with my epoxy, made some heart shapes, which I will attach to the clay, so that's a bit easier. And although I don't show it on screen, but at the end when I put my weapon together, The brush part is just some hair wefts glued together and then attached to the weapon. So finishing off my craft knife, I used hot glue, super glue, craft foam and aluminium foil to put everything together, as well as a layer of UV resin on the craft knife bit to strengthen it a bit more, before I started painting all of the things that need to be painted, like the shoe soles, the ears, etc. Unfortunately, painting part is a bit very disjointed and nothing worth watching, because I had to run around, paint a bit, run around, paint a bit, and couldn't set up my camera in between. So here's just a bit of that. I also tried to experiment with some holographic foil on one of the craft knife bits for my Pick a Nemo doll's weapon, but I'm not too happy with it, so I'm just mentioning it. Next, the face up for the Takara doll. Since I'm imitating the style of the other Takara dolls, I use one of the other dolls as a reference. So I used Ichigo as a reference for the eye shape, but I realized at this time that the sculpting of the faces between the girls are actually a slightly bit different. It's not different enough that it actually alters the face shape a whole lot, but it is different. Anyway, I start off very confidently with a black pencil, which I regretted because I had to tweak everything off screen a whole lot afterwards. So, start with light brown. Anyway, I closely compare my face to Ichigo's face to trying to get everything, all the proportions right. The sealant I'm using is Mr. Super Clear UV Cut Flat, which I honestly have to say works wonders for vinyl heads. Tamiya does not do vinyl heads any good. After I've got the eyes in place, I use brown for my beauty marks, and then pink for the mouth and blush on the cheeks. So it's just the eyes and the beauty marks that I went over with paint. The pink stayed pencil. So after I'm satisfied with the pencil, I slowly go over the lines with the black paint, and then going over the empty spaces with white. For some reason my camera is making the eyes look kind of like a blob, even with the white added. Not sure why. But anyway, next I add some green to the irises. I've always thought my eyes were green, but my boss, who does iridology, says my eyes are blue. But I still think they look more greenish in the mirror, so I decided to go with a mix between the two. After adding the color, I go back with black and white again, to adjust the highlights and fix where I went over the lines and whatnot. And after seal, the face is done. Next is the Pico Nemo face up. I color matched the head to the body and sprayed the sealant before starting with a light brown pencil. This time I'm not using anything as a reference and just going along with it in my own style. And honestly speaking, I was a lot more patient with this face up. Maybe I was a bit more excited to explore my artistic interpretation of myself. Whatever that means in the end. And off camera. I really need to learn how to properly film and stay on camera, because when 30% of your footage is off camera, I think it's not the best. Although I have to say my natural art style is already very similar to the Tokyo Mew Mew art style, for eyes anyway. So you can tell it's a big inspiration in my art style, but it's still a bit different. So after I'm done mapping out the face with brown, I use some green and blue to start the irises. Going to do a gradient from green to blue to get a bit more interesting variation in the eyes. After I'm happy with that, I start using black, making the irises and all of the lines in the eyes before moving on to white paint and adding all of the white. And then I add a bit of pastel for blushing. And what can I say? I think the face up is simple but cute. And yeah, I like how it turned out. And we're almost done. After giving everything a final seal, I put the Pico Nemo head on a Pico Nemo body and unwrap the Takara head and hair before starting styling the Takara hair. Mostly with a bit of boiling water, not completely boiling water, because the tinsel doesn't really like it, and with a lot of water glue. And after dressing and taking photos, the dolls are done. Although I currently didn't actually sew a casual outfit for me yet, so I'm temporarily using my Bratz Kids Jade's outfit. But yeah, I'll get stuff to wear soon. there's a lot of things in my closet I want to mimic, and there's a lot of outfits I want to wear but am too shy to wear. So we'll see more of that in the future. Also, I'm gonna paint my cats. I have these cute cup figures that aesthetically looks good next to the Pico Nemos, and they're gonna become my cats. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye.